What is money? This is a question we're going to keep coming back to in this episode. Today's guest, Carl Richards, started the Sketchify column in the New York Times from the hills of Utah with just a cardstock and a Sharpie. And that column actually ran weekly for a decade. And interestingly enough, his journey began when Carl applied for what he thought was a job as a security guard, only to find out the ad actually said securities. Pretty big difference. And it led to a lifelong dedication to reshaping how we think about money. Since then, Carl has become a certified financial planner. He's built and sold a successful investment firm, and he's spoken at financial and investment events worldwide. His bestsellers, The Behavior Gap and The One Page Financial Plan, have been translated into over 10 languages and continue to resonate globally. Carl's podcast, Behavior Gap Radio, and more recently, 50 Fires, share new perspectives on aligning our financial resources and what truly matters. When he's not exploring ideas about money, Carl is navigating Utah's high mountain ranges on foot, skis, or bike as a wilderness first responder. Married to Corey since 1995, they have 4 kids whom they consider their best friends. Carl, thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Budgets podcast.
Thanks, Deb. I'm really, really honored to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. So let's dive into your new book, Your Money, Reimagining Wealth in Simple Sketches. And it's not really an ordinary book. As you describe in the intro, it's actually a conversation grenade. So the goal is really to give readers 101 different ways to have better conversations about money. And I'm just thrilled to have you dive into a few of those sketches, give listeners a preview of what the book's about, but really focusing on that conversation. So hopefully the listeners are going to both nod in agreement and feel very uncomfortable simultaneously.
Right. My editor used to call that confrontational without being off-putting.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we can pull that off, we'll have won. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's dive into the first sketch. I like it because it talks about my view of money versus your view of money. And those don't always line up. It's sketch 4. So could you dive into a little bit of the thought behind why we have different views of money?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a great question. I mean, this was originally, I drew this originally based on a conversation I was having with my wife. And this was so long ago that I can't remember the specific conversation, and it doesn't really matter. I just remember her saying something and me being sort of like, well, first I think I was mad. But when I came to my senses in sort of the more mature version of myself, I was like, that is so surprising that she views money that way, right? Like that thought she had. For instance, I remember somebody once saying, in fact, I came home one day. We'll use this as an example because this is true. I came home one day and was from work and was like, oh, and I was like acting sort of like a beast of burden, like, oh, so hard. Making money is so hard. I was even using sort of that voice. And my wife was like, hey, you know what? She said, just like, humor me for a minute. What if it wasn't? And she's like, just what if it was fun and easy? And I remember being like, what are you talking about? Thinking like that, because that thought had never occurred. And again, it doesn't really matter whether making money is fun or easy or hard. It was the idea that it turns out that there are people in the world that view money as freedom. There are people in the world that view money as oppression. Both of those are true. And so I just have been endlessly fascinated. And if we can sort of learn to maybe be a little less reactive like I was, like, what are you talking about? Instead of be curious, like fun and easy, how does that work? Or, wow, you view money as freedom? Could you, one of my new favorite lines of thinking is to say like, help me understand how you think that way. Like that thought has never occurred to me. Sure. You apparently think that way. I don't know how to think that way. Could you walk me through it? So that's a long-winded answer to just like, look, in the book, that sketch is sketch number 4. It's just a square for your readers or listeners. It's just a square. The square is labeled my view of money and my is underlined. And then there's a circle that says your view of money. And I was just trying to get across different views. And if we can just understand that often probably none of your listeners can relate to this, but some people fight about money. Some couples, spouses fight about money.
Very few.
Yeah, almost no one. But often our fights, quote unquote, we call them heated discussions. Often our heated discussions around here are simply a misunderstanding of how we're viewing money. And
Mhm.
both perspectives are correct. And it turns out you kind of get to choose
Yeah.
which one you want to.
And honestly, like if you have people in a marriage that are on two different sides of the spectrum, hopefully there's that middle ground. Like truly believe we're not going to be put together, bound together as husband and wife, and just always be on polar opposite ends. Like eventually, one person's view of money is going to rub off on the other person's view, and you come closer together over time. It just might take
Yeah,
some hard conversations to get there.
totally. And the other view of it could be like maybe that tension, and tension, I'm not using it as a negative word. Maybe
Hmm.
that tension is good.
Yeah.
Maybe we can learn, like, there are some conversations that I'm no longer invited to about money. And there are
Okay.
some I notice the kids will call me when they want to have a certain, and it's not about like asking for money. It's like when they're trying to gain a certain perspective, they'll call me. And when they're trying to gain a slightly different perspective, they'll call my wife. Like, we've leaned into those strengths and learned to find the
Hmm.
overlap. So yeah, and also I am a little less reactive because of the way my wife. So yes, we've come together, but we've also learned to, those differences are strengths. They can be seen as strengths. You can play into those strengths.
You learn to respect the other person's differences and
Totally.
views.
And there are some that, look, total fear that there's a lion in every bush financially, like today's going to be the day, like that needs to be worked on. That's not a strength. That's just something that causes problems. So anyway, we've talked about one sketch so far. See, we could go for hours about every single
Okay.
one. So anyway,
I'll
thanks
move
for
on.
asking
I'll
about
move
that
on.
one. Yeah. Yeah.
So the next one I like, well, I liked all of them. So it was really hard to pick a few. So the picture of big hat, money spent on fancy cars, and then no cattle right next to it, amount in retirement accounts being very small. I think there's a lot of misconception about wealth, and you see people driving fancy cars or living in expensive houses, and you assume that's paid for in cash or, some substantial down payment, whatever. But that might not always be the case, right?
Yeah, this one's really important to me because the big hat, no cattle. That's an old saying. I can't. It's probably from
Mhm.
somebody from Texas, like, where you have walk around with a big hat, but you've got no cattle. And really, the point isn't whether you have a big hat or you have cattle. The point is pretending. And actually, even more than that, the point is us making a judgment on someone else based on some surface sign that we see. So
Sure.
I'll give you an example. Like, think how like far away we are from the truth when you think, okay, I think what we're sort of basing, like, okay, let me give you an example. When we lived in New Zealand, we went to church one day, to the church that we go to. One Sunday we show up and there was a Range Rover there. Now, that could be normal in some parts of the United States or even in a part or two of New Zealand, but in the town we lived in on the South Island, it was not normal. And I
Okay.
remember walking into church that day, sitting in the congregation, looking around,
Wondering
trying to
whose it
figure
is.
out who was the happy person, who was the rich person. And then I realized,
For
now,
sure.
wait, I don't even know whose car that, like, if the person got in it, I don't even know
Mhm.
that it's theirs. It could be the mechanic. Okay, let's pretend it is theirs. I don't know if they paid cash for it and they've got $1 bazillion and a Range Rover is a modest purchase. I don't know if they put it on a credit card. I don't know anything about it. And so what I was really trying to get at here is, what if we just stopped trying to make decisions about, like, we're almost basing decisions on happiness based on spending we can see or consumption we can see, because we think the spending correlates to net worth and we think the net worth correlates to happiness. We're so far away from the truth at that point, the number of
Sure.
assumptions we made, because obviously happiness and net worth are not correlated. And obviously spending and net worth are not correlated. And
Mhm.
so I think the better approach is just to stop making assumptions about other people's financial decisions. That was sort of my point. It's so interesting how quick and easy it is to do. Like, oh, that person must be rich. That's my favorite statement one of my kids will make. That person must be rich, because we can say, well, okay, what does the word mean to you? My daughter said this the other day. She's like, my 20-year-old daughter. 20, soon to be 21. She was like, "We're the wealthiest people I know."
Mm.
And I was like, I felt a little defensiveness bubble up because that's clearly not true based on one definition of wealth.
Okay.
I did respond a little defensive, like, "What are you talking about? Like, what about the so-and-sos and the so-and-sos and the so-and-sos?" And she's like, "Oh, no, no, that's not my definition of wealth. My definition of wealth is we enjoy our lives. Like, we get to do
Oh.
what we wanna do." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll
Yeah,
take that
we're
prize." Do you
wealthy.
know what I mean? It's so the words, the judgments, it's just a giant mess, and we're better off just to get really clear about what matters to us and then align our use of money with that.
Well, and I think it's so hard too. Like we live in a comparison society. I mean, and
That's right.
it's a very visual society, especially with social media. There's just so much you see online, if not in your own neighborhood, that you're like, you really have to just get away from the idea of like, hey, I need to compare to whatever other people are doing. And I like that visual for that reason too, because I do feel like there's just so much comparison that happens, even if it's not verbal. And
Yeah,
it
it's
sometimes results in bad spending decisions, to be honest,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
because
there's
they aren't aligned with their own values. They see someone else doing it, but that's not their value.
you're pointing to something so important. Like, if the goal of financial planning, right, is to make progress towards your goals, and
Mhm,
those goals are a meaningful life, right? A life of meaning and significance. I mean, we could go so far as to say happiness or joy, even if you define them correctly. The challenge, of course, and what you're pointing to is even getting clear in the first place what's actually important to you. And that sounds so simple. It's like, well, I know what's important to me. It turns out we don't. Because
mhm,
how many times have you done this? Like, quick story, Gretchen Rubin, the Happiness Project, Gretchen Rubin.
yeah,
I was in a conversation with her on my podcast, and she said that she was at a dinner party in New York, and somebody came up to her, and they were just, I think they were either just leaving or just coming home from Colorado.
mhm,
And it was winter, and this person said, "Oh, do you ski?" And Gretchen was like, "No, I don't ski. My husband doesn't ski. Like, we don't ski." It was just like they've thought enough about it. They don't ski. They just like to go
sure,
out there for the winter vacations. And the
mhm,
lady's like, "You've got to ski." And she went on like a 5 or 10 minute, like, "You got to ski. You got to ski. This would be so fun. You got to ski. You got to ski." And she's like, "No, we don't ski." And the lady left. She came back a half an hour later and was like, "You know what? I don't like skiing either. It's just what I thought we had to
we
do.
had
That's what
yeah,
you do." And
mhm,
I could give you so many examples of that where you're finally like, wait, we don't even like going to the movies. Like, the goal was to connect with our friends, and we go sit in a dark theater. What if we invited them over to the house and make dinner? Right? Like, so just getting clear. And I think this is partially because Instagram's made it so much harder. Like,
mhm,
when I was growing up, I didn't know I was supposed to want, whatever, a villa in France because nobody around me had Instagram. So
no,
that's the first struggle, is just like getting clear. How do you get clear? Just run little experiments and just start being honest. Like, did you like that? Was that valuable? Go on the trip. You think you want to go on a week-long sailboat trip? Go out for an hour,
mhm,
right? Did I
see
like
how you
that?
like
So
it, kind of test the
yeah, so
waters,
getting
mhm,
clear about what really actually matters to you, not to your mother-in-law, not to your uncle, not to
mhm.
Instagram, to you.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you. That's a really helpful perspective. So, I guess the next one I want to touch on is values because with Beyond Budgets and everything I do at Worthy Nest, we talk about values a lot. And,
Mhm.
we have this, you drew a picture of this teeter totter that's the present and the future, right? And how those don't always feel in alignment. Sometimes we can be weighed down by our baggage of what might have happened in the past. And then sometimes we look so far into the future that it's hard to really even figure out like what are we going after. So I would love to hear your perspective on sketch 29 when values collide.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite essays. Deb, you're really good at this because you're picking all my favorites. But this is one of my favorite essays. The
Hmm.
sketch, was fine, but the essay was really important to me because, again, we're back to this word tension in a marriage, in a family. There are sometimes we think that anytime there's tension, the goal is to resolve it. Tension is
Hmm.
bad, it's uncomfortable, we must resolve it. But there are a lot of times when we just have to realize, like, as long as there are finite resources and relatively infinite things you could use them on, it could even be like infinite desires, but there's almost always going to be sort of more things you want to do than you have money for or time for.
Sure.
For almost all of us, that's going to be the
Right.
case.
We have
So
limited resources.
in that case, you're making trade-offs. I don't know that having the goal, I don't know that having a goal to resolve that tension, but rather just to live in it. But to change the perspective, because there's one line in that essay that might be my favorite line in the whole book. I worked really, really hard on it, and I'm just trying to find it I'm looking at the essay. Oh yeah, here they are. Your values. So let me give you an example. You may want to live really generously, and you may value financial security. Like those two could be competing, right?
And I think for a
You
lot of
may,
our listeners, they are, to be honest, like
yeah, of
generous
course. Like
and
even like paying a regular tithe versus paying off the mortgage. That's a competing set of values. Now we all know that often those things aren't competing, especially that example, but it often feels like it. I value security and I love adventure. I don't actually want to resolve that. So the line is, your values are not at war, they're in conversation.
I love that.
And to me, I love just changing that perspective of like, yeah, it's going to be a conversation. Sometimes I'm going to feel like being more generous. Other times I'm going to feel like paying extra principal on the mortgage. Sometimes I'm going to feel like, hey, you know what? Let's go take an adventure. Other times I'm going to feel like, I'd rather stay home. Right? Like those. And we had this conversation with our kids this weekend while we were on a trip of just like, hey, what we tend to do is run from those conversations because we equate tension to disagreement and anger. And in this case, like we're trying to change that. Your values aren't at war, they're in conversation. Like, can we have a
Sure.
dialogue about this? Can we investigate that deeper? Do you really like that? Oh, yeah, I love that. Okay, good. Is now the good time? Like, I love that idea. So thanks for bringing that one up.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I know we talked just more generally about values and meaning of money. Let's talk about investments for a minute. So
Mm.
I like your behavior gap sketch where it talks about investment returns and investor returns because they're not always the same thing and you have that gap in between them. Could you just elaborate on that one a little bit?
Yeah, this
Sketch
was the
41.
original, right? This is the original problem I was trying to solve 20 years ago. Was like,
Yeah.
isn't that interesting that? So if you open the newspaper and you see an ad for a mutual fund and it says this mutual fund has done 10% a year for 10 years, right? That's the investment return. Now, the only way to have achieved that return, forget commissions or taxes or anything for a minute, but the only way to achieve that return is if you put money in at the beginning of that 10-year period and you left it there and you didn't take any away or you didn't add any
Yeah. Just
for
kept it
10
there for the
years.
long term.
Yeah. So the only way the investment return and the investor return would be the same is if you did that. Now, but nobody invests that way. Like sarcastically, nobody buys long-term investments and holds them for the long term. Your listeners accepted, but nobody does that. I mean, we run around trying to find the thing that the people are all waving their hands on the financial pornography network about, like buy, sell. And that well-intentioned behavior, it's well-intentioned because it applies in other areas of your life. If you're going to hire a new basketball coach for your university, it makes sense to look at the track record. So, you think buying an investment that has recently done well means it will continue to do well. So you sell something that has recently done poorly and you buy the thing that has recently done well, which is another way of saying that is you sell relatively low and you buy relatively high. And that's very well intentioned. It feels like the right thing to do. And it's what we call like really well-intentioned behavior that's maladapted for the new activity. It works when hiring a basketball coach. It works when hiring somebody to remodel your kitchen. Go look at the past kitchens. You should expect them to do at least as well, if not better on yours, because they're getting better. It doesn't work with investments, especially when we're talking about investing like an adult. Like if we're broadly diversified, that's not the way investing works. So often we are rushing in to buy something that's gone up. Think about doing this like at let's just say like the Toyota dealership. You show up and you need a 4Runner and the salesperson says, oh my gosh, you're in luck. We just marked them up 30%. And you say, my gosh, I'll take 3.
Yay!
You're right. No, we don't behave that way anywhere except investing largely because of the entertainment circus that's been built around investing. You see everybody cheering, confetti, excitement, circus clowns juggling, right? You see all that and you think, I better get in. Your neighbor's talking about it. Everybody's excited. And then the same inevitable thing happens. A scary market shows up. Everybody's running around saying things like, aren't you getting out? Aren't you going to do
Mhm.
something? And that leads to this gap. Whereas if you just sat there,
Yep.
right, like you'd never plant a tree and dig it up every month to see if the roots were growing. I mean, like we need to
That's a
behave
perfect
more that way.
analogy. Well, and I do think that's where advisors often add that value, like helping talk clients off the ledge when the markets are acting abnormally, whether it's a high, hot market or it's really declining down because we're that kind of calm presence to say like, no, this is the long-term asset mix. We're going to stick to this. And if we do see something that's already appreciated, let's go ahead and potentially scale it back to rebalance into something that isn't as strong. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to point out that the reason to hire a financial advisor or a financial planner is not because you're dumb. It's because they're not you.
Yeah.
And this kind of behavior often, I mean, that's why I have a financial, actually, my financial planner and my wife fired me from the meetings. I'm not allowed to attend those meetings anymore. My financial planner actually quoted stuff from my own book to me and then said the fact that you're involved in these meetings is hilarious. She's really, really direct. But why? It's not because I don't know. It's because it's a blind spot in my own behavior. And to
Mm,
have somebody that kind of, it's very familiar to anybody like coaching, any of that sort of stuff. A coach will see things in a football player that the football player can't see. It's not because the football player is dumb. It's not because they're inexperienced. It's because having a third party perspective, hopefully somebody like you that's calm and that's the other thing. Like when it's not your money, you can tend to, when it is your money, it can often be much more emotional than when it's not.
sure. Well said. All right. Hopefully we have time for one or two more.
Sure.
All right. The plan versus process and product. So there's a good ordering to that. And I think people sometimes confuse that ordering. Sketch number 91. Can you elaborate on that one?
Yeah, that's drawn almost like sort of. I don't want to overstate my comparisons. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like sort of a pyramid, and plan at the bottom. I almost feel like there's something that sits even below plan, which is sort of purpose and values. But
Yep.
in this sketch, I'm just embedding values and purpose in the word plan, and so there's at the bottom, at the base of the pyramid, it says plan, and then one layer up, it says process. And we could use this around planning, cash flow, but let's just use it for investing, for instance, like investment process,
Hmm.
investment plan, investment product. Most of our problems come, we just have inverted it. We spend most of our time researching, thinking, watching. We spend most of our time worrying. We spend most of our problems come from the product level. We could put markets there too. It's what you hear about on the news. And you think that's where you should spend your focus. But if you get the plan part right. So here's a really useful suggestion for your listeners. Like if you find yourself worried about the markets or the economy, a specific investment product that you're using, note the worry. Like it's okay. Like note it, write it down. I'm not saying you shouldn't be worried. There's good reason. It's fine. But before you make any decision, just take yourself from the top of that pyramid. Think of it as like when you're feeling that way, nervous about the market or a product or something, you're out in the branches of the tree and the wind is blowing and you're in the branches. So you're moving a lot. Like this is pretty scary out here.
Yeah.
Before you make any decisions to do anything, let's get to the trunk. So we're going to say, okay, I'm really scared. Why am I scared? Maybe I even write it down. I call my advisor. I talk about it, whatever. And the first thing I want to do is go, wait, wait, wait. What was the plan? We're trying to get back to the foundation. What's the plan? Okay, great. Is that changed? Like, in other words, like time with your family, mainly outside. That's what my advisor would repeat to me. And then she would say, is that still the most important thing to you? Yeah. Time with my family, mainly outside. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. In order to get there, and we move up to what were your goals? Okay. The goals are this and this and this. Okay. Based on those goals, what's the investment process? Okay. We have this diversified portfolio and each part of the portfolio is in there because it adds to its own individual merits, but it also adds to the whole plan. It's called the science of investing, portfolio design. Like this is no smorgasbord. Like we did this intentionally. This is really smart. Okay. Okay, now I understand that I'm in away from the trunk of the tree. I'm in a much better place to make a decision from a place of the plan. Things aren't moving so fast anymore. I can slow down, remind myself why I did this. Why are you invested this way in the first place? Oh yeah, those goals. Have those goals changed? No, they haven't changed. Probably should just keep the investments the same. But it's okay to feel that way. I want to
Yeah.
make sure we let people have permission because sometimes it's tempting to be like, go back to riding your bike. Stop worrying about it. No, I understand why you're worried. When I watch the news, I'm worried too. Let's talk about the plan first, and then let's get back to that. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is. Thank you. Well, I
Yeah.
know we're getting short on time. The last one I wanted to bring up was just about happiness, spending your way to happiness. You talked about time with people you love, experiences, freedom, those all being far more important than useless plastic crap.
That's
um,
right.
so I want to close on that note. I think it's important for people to really define where their happiness is going to lie. I couldn't agree more with you that experiences, freedom, those are so much more crucial than anything we can materially buy.
Yeah, a quick story. We had this amazing summer years ago when my kids were young. I had never traveled anywhere basically when I was growing up. I didn't have a passport, I don't think, until I was in my 20s. And we had this amazing summer where we went to a bunch of different places all around the world. And I remember at the end of the summer asking one of my kids what their highlight was. And they were like, yeah. I thought about it and they said, remember that time that we threw rocks down there in the lake? And I was like, what about Paris? You're like,
Right.
no, no, no. Throwing rocks in the
Throw
lake.
rocks to them, like,
So these experiences with people you love, it's pretty settled doctrine at this point,
mhm,
right? Like helping people in need
mhm.
and experiences with people you love will be the greatest driver of happiness. Your
Yeah.
sense of community, the people you love, and the ability to help people in need. That will drive more happiness than anything else. The rest just sort of gets in the way of us remembering that. And so how you do that will vary by person. It doesn't have to be, it can be like an experience could be going to New Zealand.
Mhm,
An experience could be throwing rocks into the pond with your
mhm.
son. I'm pretty sure that at the end in 10 years that the couple times a week walk my wife and I take to the mailbox will probably be more meaningful over, 10 years from now if we keep doing that a couple times a week will be more meaningful than any trip I'll be able to remember. And the trips are fun and they're important and it could be a memory that lasts forever, but it doesn't have to be expensive. But I think getting clear about that, that's that's how you spend your way to happiness, right? Your money and your time.
What a great closing note. So, for people that are interested in the book, they got this, nice preview and they're wanting to see all the sketches. Where can they best find the book and when? When will it be released?
Yeah, so it's available for pre-order now. It's out October 1st. I'm super excited. Like my goal, and I'm not calling it a book of poetry, but I wanted it to feel and look like a book of poetry more than a personal finance book. So everything about it, the size, the white space, like everything about it will not feel like a personal finance book. It's meant to be used. It's meant to be as a conversation grenade. It's available October 21st. My favorite suggestion is to buy one copy from Amazon and one copy from your local bookstore,
Hmm.
right? And it's available now. So thanks, Deb.
Right? Thanks. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, cheers. This was really fun.